lies will be exposed.
Welcome, everybody, to a very special Friday episode. And, since starting off this year, we've had some really great, thought-provoking guests joining us. We had Misty Winston, Larry Sharp, Spike Cohen, good friend of the show and ally, Indy from INN. And the thing is, more people are still kicking down my door, and especially in this space where free speech is at risk, censorship against independent media is, dare I say it, possibly at an all-time high. And of course, seeing how exactly our press members be silent as heroic individuals like Max Blumenthal and Sam Husseini are dragged out while everyone else is silent. Now more than ever, we need to start building coalitions and also uplifting independent media. And we need to start discussing what lies in store for us. And you, my audience, a lot of you have been saying, Kit, can you interview Jamarl Thomas to be on your show? And I have been doing everything in my power to reach out, and thankfully he did reach out. So first time now joining Hard Lens Media. For our viewers and subscribers, can you please introduce yourself? Because so many people have been asking you to be on our show. Welcome to the platform.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. Like I said, I'm always heartened by these introductions. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it. I saw you reaching out. And I followed you, Hard Lens Media. I've been paying attention to you. So when you reached out, I was like, oh, this is very cool. Yeah, and like I said, it hardens me to know that people were actually thinking about me in this sense. So thank you for this. Jamarl Thomas, I do my Jamarl Thomas show on my own channel by the same name. I initially started off in software. I did, and somewhere along the way, I got radicalized during the Sanders era. Started doing the channel. It wasn't meant to be anything, but eventually just kind of started to grow. Garland Nixon hit me up one day when he was on Fault Lines, and he asked me if I would come on the show. And I was hooked. At that point, I was hooked on radio. And so I did the radio show on Sputnik for, 5 years. Jesus, it's been that long. But I've had my YouTube show going several years before even starting on radio. And so I'm doing my channel now. I do my channel full time. So you can definitely hit me up on my own channel. So thank you for this, man. I really appreciate the invite.
Well, no problem indeed. And the thing is, obviously, I don't know if you may notice or not, but Hard Lens Media, we did start off on AM radio, nothing too cat fancy. So I do appreciate the origin connection, because that's how myself and my colleague Daniel got involved by setting up Hard Lens Media Radio. And I always dreamt about being a radio host. I guess I can connect it to the hype or the early days of the shock jock era, which is now nothing in comparison to the in real life streamers and other people who really crossed the line. But nonetheless, great to have you on. So I think in regards towards what we are seeing firsthand here, I think it's maybe we start off with a big right hook in regards to free speech and independent media. You've been in this business. You've seen firsthand what happened to a lot of people who have been suppressed and censored. I mean, Garland Nixon, for example, Jimmy Dore, myself, you yourself have dealt with it. And now, since the Biden-Harris administration is ending, and to be fair here, I've never seen such an intensification of, people being deplatformed, demonetized, and now we're flying into uncertain times, especially with the TikTok ban, what happened to Max and Sam yesterday in the morning. I really want to kind of get your perspective of overall what's going to happen with big tech, its influence over politics, and the future of free speech.
That's a fascinating question. I think, in the old days, you would have, 4 organizations, 4 media companies or something like that. Mm-hmm. And for all intents and purposes, they were the gatekeepers. If you're going to have a conversation, if you're going to have this kind of talk about geopolitics, or for that matter, domestic politics, is going to fit within the boundaries of that conversation, of that space. And so, politicians didn't have to have a huge, let's say there was a very limited window of conversation that was ever going to take place. And they understood that there was going to be a very limited window of conversation that was going to take place. You get the proliferation of social media, and you have people in all sorts of areas with all sorts of points of view. Some of them are, flat earthers. But you also get people who are actually trying to understand their world in a more contextual way, which creates all sorts of problems for a government that is trying to promote and push a media or a perspective, a narrative that may not necessarily be all that true. And so you can imagine that from the political angle, social media becomes a problem. Yeah, they want to use it for their own ends. So they will put a ton of money in various influencers or in particular groups, and those people don't even tell the public that they're getting money from these groups. But you also get people like your show, like my show, like Garland, like Door, that at the very least try to understand their world. They try to give a more contextual view of that world, even if it's antagonistic to what the narrative that the government wants to put out. We should be very clear. Under the Biden administration, they were putting out a Ministry of Truth ran by Nina Jankowicz, a dingbat, that was putting out misinformation herself, despite the fact that she was supposed to be this, this gallant person, this defender of what's true, this fact checker for the government, despite the fact that under no circumstances were they going to ever check any facts from the government. Think back to the NBC News piece where they were talking about Joe Biden using disinformation as a way of having a propaganda war with Russia, missing the point that the only people you're lying to is the American public. It's not like Putin is listening to media and was like, oh, Joe Biden said this. Nobody cared what was being said by the Biden administration. He was just lying to the American public. And the CIA spook, what was the guy's name? They fired him from the LA Times.
That's right. Audience, help out if you guys know. Audience.
Kendallanian wrote that piece. And Kendallanian didn't look at this and say, oh my God, the White House is lying to the American public. This is outrageous. He took that as a triumphant display of the government releasing fake information in order to push narratives in particular directions. You could go from story to story to story about the US media lying to the American public, just going along with whatever narrative the US government is going with. Look at Ukraine, for example, North Koreans. Zelensky has been killing massive amounts of North Koreans who are doing these wave attacks. They haven't shown one. And yet they've ran with it as if it was a flat fact. Blinken and that other sociopath, Count Smirkula, Matt Miller, when they would tell people, they would look you dead in the eye and lie, cover, and shield for the Israeli government. When Matt Miller kept telling people, what, Israel has a deal. Israel has a deal. Why would Israel be against his own deal? And then flipping that into, well, Hamas should accept the deal. Despite the fact that at the UN, you had the Israeli representative saying, there is no deal. There is no deal. And not just there is no deal, we will continue until Hamas is destroyed, effectively repudiating exactly what the Biden administration was saying. Israel is starving people, what the U.S. government said, oh, that's not really true. Despite the fact that the U.S. had to apparently build a pier that they were saying they were using to get supplies in, or for that matter, when Joe Biden came out and said, you need to have 300 trucks, which in and of itself was not going to be enough, but you need to have 300 trucks going into Israel, and I think the number was like 30, or we will potentially, maybe, limit the amount of shipments that you're getting in. Okay, Joe Biden, if they weren't starving the people, why do you need to tell them to put in 300 trucks? Like, you can go down the list with the stuff. Overthrow of the government of Ukraine, and they call it a revolution of dignity. They literally destroyed a democratically elected government because they didn't necessarily like that the government, at the very least, was open to Russia in a way that Europe didn't like. And so when they destroyed the government, they called it a revolution of dignity. I mean, you can go down the list. Russia blew up its own pipeline. Okay, that's stupid on its face. Why would they do that?
Or use that when the New York Times did the article, maybe it's best we don't look into what happened to the Nord Stream pipeline. Yep. Maybe it's best we don't look into the overall situation there. Or either that, how the New York Times even did an article, and I'm even surprised that even Charlie Kirk brought this up, because I want to hear people across the political spectrum, how Israel was given the heads up of what would happen on October 7th, and they were informed like a year that something was going to take place, some sort of attack, which in turn did happen. And one could argue this was Netanyahu's wag the dog moment. And since then, we have seen the absolute destruction. The Gaza's been turned into a moonscape. We have the quote unquote greatest ceasefire ever in Lebanon. And then you have the political instability in Syria. And then, of course, you have Netanyahu's own government that is imploding because this war has been a distraction, but even that can last so long. And then you have the back and forth fights between Israel and Iran. And yet the media is saying that somehow there's going to be a peace, that this is all justified, or either that they're ignoring the fact that there is an ongoing crisis of starvation, disease, genocide, destruction happening in Gaza. And then pile that on with the horrific war in Ukraine and the billions of dollars of Treasury lost. And the narrative has changed. I mean, in 2022, Zelensky was viewed as a hero. And then the next year, you have
the Winston Churchill of our time.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And then you have the New York, not Times, the Times Magazine, where one, Zelensky was a hero. And then in 2023, you have him portrayed as such a small man that everyone's forgetting about him. It's just fascinating how a narrative can change. But then,
by the way, they call him messianic. They said he was messianic. They said he was delusional. This was in the Times Magazine after like several years when they were tired of him being this kind of international panhandler. I guess my point to close it is like, there's so much context that gets dropped from our mainstream media that channels like ours are in existence because of that. So I agree.
No, 100%. And for myself, and I think everyone else in this space, because I know my colleagues at RBN, Do Dissidents, Jimmy, yourself, me, everyone, who does this kind of content, especially in regards to doing commentary, analysis, doing interviews, there's always that risk of the censorship. Recently, I had Misty Winston on, and what I find funny is that while the video's fine and everything, I interviewed her, and YouTube said somehow there's some questionable stuff that goes against the guidelines. And I was looking at that interview. There's no horrific imagery. There's nothing violent taking place. I mean, if someone is easily triggered by my interview with her, then my goodness, this person must be the softest individual in human history. Or either that the AI is picking up on words that are nowhere near profanity laced. And the thing is, I look back, I could not find any profane words in that interview or anything else of that nature. And this was just recent. She was our first guest for 2025, but yet this is the thing that makes me question, like, okay, what's going to happen on platforms like YouTube? We already saw on X, for example, was Elon Musk going after conservative, libertarian, Trump supporters who have like millions of followers, losing their blue check mark and subscription because they were standing up against the H-1B visas, which is a whole other conversation altogether. But then as soon as you shake the apple cart, I mean, Elon Musk is not that heavyweight champion of free speech because, and look, I don't want to see anything bad happen to anybody's livelihood because that's their business, because that could happen to me. And it has happened. But I don't want to see that happen to seeing somebody getting silenced after doing 7 years of this business. It is concerning about that. And then you have Mark Zuckerberg. Why did I almost forget his name? Zuckerberg trying to turn over this new leaf, saying we're going to remove community guidelines and we're gonna be more open. Well, my colleague Daniel has a few words for the Zuckerberg because that's how we also got started too, Harlan's Media on Facebook. But yet when I post original content there, nothing has changed. So so bring up these three examples of YouTube, Facebook, and X, formerly known as Twitter. In regards towards go ahead, take it away.
I think we need to accept billionaires are not going to save us, right? Like Elon Musk is
really, you don't think they're going to save you?
No, right? Billionaires are not our friends in this case. I mean, he's going to put out. I think he's open to it, providing it doesn't necessarily impeach him. Like, so it's like Jeff Bezos is not going to have anything on the Washington Post that's going to go after Amazon. He owns it. And in owning it, you're going to have a certain context and a point of view that you run with. Elon Musk is running as this free speech champion. But like you point out, the moment that you have this argument against him, then he takes issue with that. And he may take actions in order to prevent that. And YouTube is the same way. I mean, I think one of the things that Twitter files exposed was that the level to which the US government is involved in these social media companies. And let's be very clear, the reason that they were trying to get rid of TikTok, even though they backed away from it, the most recent reporting that Joe Biden is not going to honor the thing. We'll see how far that goes. But part of the reason, if you listen to Romney when he was having a conversation with Blinken, was that they were more open to going after TikTok because they didn't like the portrayal of Israel through TikTok, and that people
Right.
were seeing all of these people being killed, slaughtered. They were seeing a genocide in real time, and people were recoiling from that. And they were like, we don't like the fact that TikTok is playing that. And so we need to get rid of TikTok or give it to an American company where we will have the same amount of influence as we have in, let's say, a Facebook or Twitter or YouTube. It is terrifying because the reason that they do that, by the way, is to put a chill on your capability of going into those areas. So it's like, oh, they didn't like something on my content. Okay, are they going to get rid of my channel if I keep going in this direction? Are they going to demonetize my platform if I keep going in this direction? And it creates this thing of, it blocks you. It creates this kind of, Noam Chomsky had this thing of like, nobody has to tell you to not do something. You know not to do something just based on the context of the area to which you're operating in. Whether your editors pick up your story, whether your editors ignore you when you're trying to push a particular narrative, you have a self-censorship that kicks in. That is what YouTube inspires. And so you get platforms like Rumble, but then there's a question of, okay, well, how long is Rumble going to be able to withstand this level of scrutiny and stress that is being applied by government or something like that? No, I agree with you, man. It is a treacherous territory to operate when you know that your livelihood could be ripped away. And the only recourse is this machine that you're supposed to beseech, that you know a human being is probably not paying attention to, or for that matter, a human being doesn't necessarily care. They want cat videos. As opposed to this kind of real media space that erupted on YouTube. I agree with you. It's terrifying. It really is. I've had my channel taken down.
And I'm sorry that happened to you, because I don't want that to happen to anybody. And that even goes for people I disagree with, because again, it is a nightmare situation that
it is
that will put the fear of God in you. Okay, I don't want to use those words, but I mean that's the closest thing that I think would hit back anyone, because there are larger channels that, let's say, cover content that I like. Okay, they might have a team and they might have an editor or people who do other projects, and then how does that person who runs that channel look at his team and say, hey guys, send out your resumes, because I don't think the business is going to be open? Because I mean that is a real legitimate danger. And I remember a time when YouTube, I'm going to be a little controversial here, was a bit of a meritocracy, and because YouTube was gaining a lot of attention, corporate media realized, and this is before 2015, that they were losing the eyeballs, the viewership. And this is when they started bullying their way onto platforms. They did that smear campaign against PewDiePie by saying he was wearing a Luftwaffe outfit when he was wearing a British Bombardier outfit. Again, two different things altogether, British Bombardier, Luftwaffe outfit. You look at the pictures night and day. And of course, that opened up the whole can of worms of algorithm, words that you can say, words that you think, content that you can put up. But the thing is, knowing people, humans, we are going to look for things and stand up against it, even though authority says not to. I mean, case in point, prohibition. They said, hey, alcohol's forbidden. Well, that wasn't going to last that long because people wanted to drink. Long live the Saint Alphonse Capone, okay? Alphonse Capone did nothing wrong, only for tax evasion. They didn't get him for anything else. He's a saint. He's a saint in my house. But nonetheless, it is my hope that people will be embracing and standing up against censorship across the political spectrum. I mean, case in point, you have, and I'm observing it with interesting curiosity, and that is people going to Red Note and now communicating with people in China, for example. And at the end of the day, humans, we are social creatures, and whether or not the internet is helping or hindering us is a whole other debate. Maybe I'd like to have you, maybe I should do a whole power panel about the future of the internet and what it means. I'll have to reach out to some people, but I'd like to maybe invite you on, and maybe it'll be a special weekend edition of Hard Lens Media. Again,
I'll be down.
But that is the future of it. But in regards to this, for pushback and what people can do, at least from your perspective, how can we still keep on having these engaging conversations and still standing up against the system without worrying about the jackboot that is, well, heading towards our neck? Because people want to know, like, hey, how do we survive this? How do we keep pushing forward? Because obviously writing to your congressman and woman, that's not going to matter. They listen to their corporate owners. I mean, donors.
There's no way out that box. It's like, for example, it would be like, is there any way for Martin Luther King to be Martin Luther King without being thrown in jail? Or is there any way for people to push without necessarily getting opposition for the fact that they're pushing? No, the fact that they have to push in and of itself means they're pushing against something. And so there's no way out that box in the sense of that threat is always going to be a part of it. That threat is always going to be there. It's not like we have a government that fully believes in this First Amendment stuff. The First Amendment is a hindrance to the way that the government operates. Think of John Kerry, where John Kerry was like, yeah, the First Amendment is a problem. We need to do something. Or think about Hillary Clinton, who said we need to throw people in jail for saying stuff that Hillary Clinton didn't like. And keep in mind, this is the person that put out the Russiagate stuff, which was a complete fallacy, just a complete psyop on the American public.
That led us to the war in Ukraine as well.
Led us into a war. Who was sitting there talking about, yeah, we need to throw people in jail for saying things that I don't necessarily like. Kamala Harris, who was going after Twitter, saying we need to do something about Twitter. All of these people just dislike the fact that they are coming up against opposition finally from an American public that has had enough of the things of these wars and the things that these people say. But those are also the people who are in positions of power and authority that would exert that authority, especially on various networks or social media platforms, to go after the people who they don't particularly like. So there's no way out that box. The very act of saying something against a narrative that the government is putting out, or saying something against a narrative that various people are putting out, is going to put you at risk. You just have to accept the risk. There's no way around it. Either you accept the risk or you stop doing what you're doing. And I get the sense that many of the people who are outraged and who go on these platforms, who are these independent journalists, they're doing it because they are sick of the lack of context. They're sick of the lying that comes out of the media organizations or the political organizations. They're sick of that stuff. There's no way out of that risk short of the government fully believing and actually believing in this notion of First Amendment and free speech. But the very act of believing in that may undermine their own political aspirations, or for that matter, their own media space, like ad apocalypse. I'm glad you brought that up. Because if you remember, YouTube was this space where people thought,
I do remember.
Yeah. And I remember the ad apocalypse happened, and it happened just the way you pointed out. All of these media organizations, like the press or television, they were getting ads, and those ads were competing with ads going on YouTube. And I remember distinctly where they did this article where they were like, they're Nazis on YouTube.
Yes.
And they brought in Jimmy Dore to say, here's a left-wing, semblance of a Nazi on the left. And it's like, okay, that's outrageous. That's outrageous. But they were doing that because from their point of view, people or ads are going to YouTube and to social media, and we want those ads for ourselves. We're in competition, so we need to somehow smear these organizations to get these organizations to change in the way that they operate. I don't know a way around the threat thing. I don't know because social media companies have become our commons. And so I don't know if it needs to be, treated like the phone lines used to be treated. I don't know if the internet needs to be under the same free speech protections. Something needs to happen. I just don't know what that something is.
You bring out a lot of good points, especially how the media was quick to smear people, call them, Nazis or controversial figures. And the thing is, like I've known Jimmy Dore now for going on for 7, maybe 8 years now. And, the way they smeared him and the way they've come after a lot of people across the political spectrum, it is their last desperate attempt to maintain relevancy. And the thing is, corporate media, they should have got the hint early on before 2015, before Trump became even this headline thing that they always would focus about. And that is, people were tired of the lies, of the stale corporate narrative and again, people want to see something new. They want to see something thought-provoking. Human beings are, for the most part, hey, we like some things that will stir us up and entertain us, because that's what we are as a species. The internet probably multiplied it. Whether it's good or bad, I think it's somewhere in the middle. Again, whole other conversation. Now I really want to do this power panel. So there's a couple people to reach out to. So it's a little bit of both, a little bit of side A, a little bit of side B. And then of course, we're seeing how the media revealed its true hand, especially during the height of Trump derangement syndrome. And whether CNN and MSNBC ever want to admit it, Trump was their saving grace. He was their bread and butter. As soon as he was gone, a lot of those media networks that did do Trump derangement syndrome we're going broke. Hollywood going broke. And after November 5th, I did not expect this to happen all of a sudden, but no matter what the establishment media does, no matter what they do, people are walking away, and CNN and MSNBC have been seeing a drastic decline in viewership. But in turn, the problem is, even in this space, you have larger channels that are more maybe establishment friendly, who are now becoming that new placeholder for MSNBC and CNN. And if people keep on waking up, they'll realize they're being fed the same stuff, only at a different kind of restaurant. So I think in many ways there is an awakening happening, but not to the point to where, enough people will say, hey, we're being lied to by our politicians and the media and these manufactured people, these industry plants, and that has to be addressed. But what is also fascinating, and I want to get your thoughts on this, the epic CNN downfall, and it's not talked about as much, and I wish it was, of CNN Plus, $250 million gone in 1 month. And if that's not an indication of how people feel about CNN or even that establishment media, I don't know what is, but I want to get your thoughts on that. I know it could be argued as old news, but I look back at now, especially with the downfall of the ratings that CNN and MSNBC are facing with right now.
Who the hell thought it was a good idea to make a paid CNN thing? Like, who is that person? Like, people, CNN, people wasn't watching CNN for free. Who the hell is going to pay for it, right?
No,
like
exactly.
The ratings of CNN always came in behind MSNBC, which also had abominable ratings, and behind Fox News. And so you have a media organization that you have at airports and everything else that people effectively watch for free. And they weren't even watching for free. And somebody said, maybe they'll pay for it, despite the fact that they're not watching it already for free. I mean, this was one of the dumbest ideas that was so predictable that it boggles the mind that somebody is sitting in a meeting somewhere saying, it is a great idea to pay $200 million in order to start a CNN Plus, and we will make that money back because people will be chomping at the bit to see the media of CNN. Yeah, no. They could have told me that. They could have gave me $20 in a Big Mac, and I would have told them, hey, guys, that's a bad idea. That's a bad idea. Nobody's going to watch that.
I love referencing the show. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but whoever came up with that plan should be called a moron and be told to F off. I don't know if you've ever seen the show Succession. Have you ever seen the show Succession? Please tell me that you have.
I know. Yeah, I know of the show. That was the show, HBO, I believe, or the family. Yeah.
Brian Cox is in it. He plays the patriarch for all 4 seasons. I don't want to spoil it for you, but if you are ever interested, because I can see you talking about, because I would love to do a whole conversation about Succession, about corporate media, its involvement in politics. I mean, that is the prime example there, and it could be Fox News, CNN. Yeah, it is 10 out of 10 the best show I've seen in a long time. And if anything, I was prepping my colleague Daniel because I introduced him to Succession too, and I prepped him for season 2, episode 8, titled Dundee. Listen, I'm not going to tell you anything about it. Do yourself a favor. Do not spoil it if you do choose to watch it. But for one moment, imagine yourself being a corporate CEO worth billions of dollars, and your son does something for you on the stage. And that's all I'm going to tell you. That's all I'm going to tell you. But it's worthwhile to check out. But again, who is the genius that thought that would be a smart idea? And again, seeing how even Comcast wants to let go of MSNBC is even something else that I did not predict happening.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Go ahead.
They may be losing their jobs.
Yes,
that's fascinating. Like, think of how bad that network has to be for them to be like, maybe we need to do something else. And what's wild about it, like, I remember when MSNBC became MSNBC, and they had Keith Olbermann being, I guess, the flagship of that station, and they went to all politics. Like, they were just all politics. They're all opinion media. And I remember Olbermann used to go after the Bush administration with barrels blazing. Like, Olbermann was the guy that started this kind of commentary space. And people may forget today, but Olbermann used to give these just blistering monologues going after George Bush. And today, I remember he put out a tweet saying something to the effect of, I'm paraphrasing, but I'm sorry about George Bush. Now that I see how Trump is, I feel bad about going so hard on Bush. And it's like, are you out of your goddamn mind? Like George Bush got 1 million people killed. That's on the low end. Not to mention the subsequent wars going into country after country after country.
Economic downfall as well.
Yeah. How did Trump, like, I don't get how they make this comparison between Trump and Bush. The body count is nowhere near. It's just in a completely different space.
I understand why there are a lot of people who have Trump derangement syndrome, because Trump says all these things unfiltered. But if you look back, this is who he's always been. Even in early 2016, even I kind of fell for that. Like, I can't believe he said it. But then I remember my grandfather, may he rest in peace, he said, "Kid, Trump's always been like this." And as I did my own research, looking back, oh, he's always been like this.
Yeah.
What the hell? Like, why is everyone surprised by this? Because people, I like to call it the blurring effect, where, you have your smartphone in front of you and you forget what happened 15 minutes before. And it's called the blurring effect, where you forget. And people forgot this is who Trump is. And I think in many ways, while yes, to be critical of Trump, absolutely. But, this is what's caused a lot of people to, say, like, "I can't believe you said that. You must be a secret Trump supporter." It's like, no, he's been one of the few honest presidents in U.S. history. The campaign trail, for example, when Dave Chappelle did a perfect breakdown on an SNL monologue. The system's corrupt. How do I know why? Because I used it. Trump has used the system. Trump, during the first Republican primary debate, said, "I give these people," when money in politics was brought up, Trump said, "I give these people money and they do what I say."
Yep.
And Trump's not the only billionaire. And then, of course, the infamous one, which is something that probably made the entire establishment system crap their pants. "Why are we in Syria?" He said, "We're there for the oil, the resources." Any other president, Reagan, Bush Sr., Bush Jr., Bill Clinton, Obama, Biden, they would say, "We're there for freedom, liberty, building up the people," all that jazz. And and when you see somebody like Keith Olbermann, like, saying, "Oh, we got to go after Trump," Trump is a Saturday morning cartoon villain. He's easy to go after. That's it. It's like from a child folk. Like, I know what to expect from Trump. But what I think is very difficult for people to realize is that politician that's been ruling over you for 10 or 20 years, be it a congressman, senator, whatever, they've probably done more vile, evil stuff under the radar. Trump's out there in the open. These other people, they're probably a hell of a lot worse. He's only the beginning. But I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead, because I know you wanted to add.
No, you're perfectly fine. I agree with you. I mean, when Obama's doing these drone wars, and you see like 80% of the people getting killed are civilians. Okay, well, that's disgusting, right? Or like I point out, the overthrow of Ukraine. I mean, that literally led to hundreds of thousands of people being killed, and yet that is not something that the media dwells on. If you remember, when Obama left office, New York Times came out with a piece talking about the $1 billion regime change war that Obama was waging in Syria, Operation Sycamore. And it's like, okay, so you just now found out that Obama was paying terrorists to overthrow the Syrian government after he leaves? Like, it's pretty convenient that you figured that out after the fact. I remember when Tulsi Gabbard went on CNN and she said, "Jake, we're paying terrorists. We're paying terrorists, Jake." Now, that should be mind-blowing if indeed America is what America says it is. Meaning, if indeed we are the shining city on a hill that believes in democracy and we believe in the right of sovereign governments, et cetera, then it should be a mind-blowing revelation that we are paying terrorists to overthrow a government, a violent overthrow of a government. Jake Tapper said, "Well, the government says that's not true." And it's like, okay, Jake, I get that the government says it's not true, but it's your job to just repeat what the government says, or is your job to have a little bit more, skepticism about the government's point of view, considering we know governments lie. They pick and choose who they want to invest that much credit, that much research into. They pick and choose the stories that they want to, because look, there are a billion things that happen every day.
Right.
And the media has to choose, okay, what do we want to put our lens on? And it's going to be a very small subset of the things that effectively take place. All of us are stuck with that, trying to figure out what stories we cover.
Right.
They are going to cover stories that fall in line with particular narratives that they want to run with. And, for better or worse, that's not necessarily good or bad. It's good or bad if you drop context in order to push people in a particular direction. Whereas a contextual story may end up with them being more muted, more nuanced in the way that they look at that stuff. Or they may go in a particular direction if they think you're committing a genocide. I guess one point is they get a, let's say, a soft lens to the Obamas of the world, to the Joe Bidens of the world, whereas to Donald Trump is a harsh reality lens that all of them are effectively doing it. It's just, no, I agree with you, man. This space has gotten far more treacherous. And I felt over the last several years that I was in like a Twilight Zone, Alice in Wonderland funhouse.
You know, I wish I just didn't bring up the Twilight Zone, because as a kid, I remember the Twilight Zone. I remember the Outer Limits, especially the Outer Limits from the 90s, you know, and
I love both.
Yes, and of course the always, like, in case the main character, because each episode was always like its own episode altogether, but in case like the character failed in stopping the crisis, there'd be that deep voice like, this is what happens to our future of freedom if we do not stand up against evil. And I'm like, and as a kid, I always thought, that's right, we're gonna do the right thing. Now here I am, I'm gonna be 40 years old next month, and I'm like, oh my god, we're in the goddamn thing already, right here now. And it's like, man, I don't got time for this, man. Like, you know, and maybe that's why the aliens haven't showed up, because they're like, you know what, these people are crazy down there. We're just gonna wait and see how this turns out. But we're supposed to show up in 2020. No. Let's run the clock down on this one. Let's hold on this.
Clinton, I think she was legit in wanting to out something. And there's this question or conversation in the UFO community that Donald Trump might be the guy who releases information. I mean, because Trump has been weird, like weirdly vocal about, I'm going to open up the JFK files. I'm going to open up this, and we need to know what's flying in our skies, and blah, blah, blah. And keep in mind, the people that Donald Trump has put into his administration are heavy UFO people. Ratcliffe, what's his name? Rubio. These people are heavy in the UFO thing. Rubio was instrumental in getting the UFO release information in the National Defense Authorization Act. Yeah. So was Gillibrand, Rubio, Gallego. Like, it seems to be weirdly enough bipartisan. I'm sorry. I'm a UFO person.
No, it's perfectly fine. Because look, here, when it comes down to UFOs or aliens, like, look, is there life probably out there? Yeah, it's a big, stupid universe. And I wouldn't be surprised if there is life out there. I mean, come on, you got it's but I think in many ways, like, if it's to be revealed, if they did this in the 90s, people would panic. Now, I'm going to add it with the blurring effect. Didn't it happen it was in 2023 where they had a whole Senate congressional hearing about UFOs and hostile aliens.
Yep.
In the 90s, people were like, oh, now whatever. Like, what? A UFO can land in by the Sears Tower, and everyone I know is like, okay, whatever. Like, the aliens are real. That's neat. They'll move on. But is it something that we need to know? I think yes, as citizens, like, okay, if they've been here, that'd be nice to know. I don't think people are going to be running around the street because everyone's in debt and they got medical bills and they got, other problems. So, hey, government, tell us what's going on. But I think that's a conversation that must happen if this presidential administration does bring it up. Fine. I think a lot of people also want to know what happened in the Kennedy files because, he was our president. And I was speaking to my mother about JFK and what it meant as soon as he was taken out, assassinated. It was a very traumatic event for this whole country. And I think the citizens need to know, was one of our intelligence agencies involved in it? What happened to RFK Sr.? Sorry about that. RFK Sr. Or is it at Malcolm X, Martin Luther King? And not to mention, we got these whole other treasure trove of coups and situations that took place. Iran used to be a national government, a quasi-democracy, until it was replaced with the Shah, thanks to the CIA and the British intelligence and big oil. These are things that need to be talked about without worrying about, hey, you're going to be censored, you're going to be deplatformed. And I'm not a fan of that. But real sorry, that was my rant. But I want to ask you two final questions here because I know we kind of a little bit over time, but I'm really glad you showed up. And
I'm a talker, so that always happens.
No, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. I just want everyone to know that Jamarl was supposed to show up later in the show. He showed up early, so that's why we're doing this now.
Yeah, I screwed up. That was my fault.
It's fine. but I want to ask you a two-part question. This is from my friend Roger Meadows, good friend of the show. talks a lot about citizen ballot initiatives. The Supreme Court of the United States said the Citizens United versus FECs that corporations are people and therefore have the same speech rights as individuals. So wouldn't that, like, again, this ruling, the Supreme Court, which is apparently now, I want to confirm on this, is upholding the TikTok ban law. So I just want to get your thoughts on that. And then the second question is, where can people find you online, learn more about you, and support your work?
The TikTok ban is disturbing if they go through with that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we need to be very clear. They did this not for any kind of protection of democracy. I mean, the protection of democracy is this kind of fig leaf that they're using to say, well, we don't like the fact that they're putting out information that went against one of our priorities, and our priority being, in this case, Israel. They're saying things. And keep in mind, many of the videos that are being produced by Israeli soldiers themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they are literally showing themselves committing crimes in this despicable way, because in the bubble to which they operate, it is perfectly okay for them to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Keep in mind, the Israeli government, you had soldiers literally rape a man, gang rape a guy. And they show it, and the public comes out and says, well, it should be acceptable for the soldiers to do that, with other soldiers going to rescue the soldiers that were held temporarily for doing so. Like, this is the government that we're effectively talking about. And so when that is shown on TikTok and people recoil from that because it's a disgusting thing, well, the government's take is TikTok shouldn't have shown that. They shouldn't have shown the reality of what's happening on the ground. So we need to get rid of TikTok. It's nothing to do about this notion of protecting democracy or anything else. It's about protecting and shilling and covering for an ally that is committing a genocide. It's that. There's something inherently wrong with the First Amendment rights being usurped in that way for another country. And they're doing this for somebody else. They're not doing this for our benefit. And whether that's TikTok, whether that is a channel on YouTube that is putting out information that they don't particularly like, not even information that's false, just stuff that they don't particularly like, there's something inherently problematic about that. They can make this argument that YouTube is a private company and Twitter is a private company. You can make that argument, but there are all sorts of things that private companies have to do because of larger reasons. We have a handicap amendment where you have to have platforms for people to go to if they're handicapped in order for them to get into the stores. You can't say you're Black, so I'm not going to bake this cake for you. If you open a business, you have to attend to certain laws. I don't see why social media companies also wouldn't have to attend to those laws, considering they become our comments. And so, yeah, it's deeply problematic. It is deeply problematic, even by the context of our own laws, or even philosophically, that they are deciding to do this with TikTok. Now, the catch becomes, will they go through with it? Because there may be a political consequence of them going through with getting rid of all of these people jobs who are on TikTok, who do it for a living, or for that matter, the nearly 1 billion people who use it. And so, the TikTok thing is disturbing, but so was getting rid of Sputnik and RT, or so was censoring certain content that people didn't like. RFK Jr. RFK Jr. used to be a Democrat. Elon Musk used to be a Democrat. And you get, weirdly enough, Republicans are perfectly okay with censoring information associated with Israel, and Democrats are fine with associating information just in general. So there's something problematic with the various people in this country that are supposed to uphold American law, a part of those laws being the First Amendment, that they have zero issue in undercutting when it's going after their own priorities. It's, all of this stuff is deeply problematic. And there's a question of where this goes over time, if indeed they continue to go in this direction of more and more censorship, because they can't deal with the reality of people pointing out reality. No, it's deeply problematic. As for where people can find me, I'm on YouTube primarily, on the Jamarl Thomas channel. I'm on Twitter also at Jamarl Thomas. I have an Instagram page, but that's just my own video, my own stuff. But no, the main two sites that I'm on, I also have a Rumble account that I've started to post more to, because obvious reasons of this very conversation we're talking about. Yes. YouTube is problematic and is a very dangerous network in order to do news, opinion, and commentary. So yeah, you can hit me on YouTube, Twitter, and for that matter, Rumble under Jamarl Thomas.
All right, fantastic. Well, first of all, again, thank you so much for being on our show. I would like to have a to be continued conversation, because I'm seeing people bring up UFOs and aliens, and I like to pick your brain about what lies beyond the great beyond, because
I
it's
was the UFO correspondent for my network
fantastic.
at Sputnik, and I covered this content. Look, it is a fascinating. The moment that it becomes clear that something else is here, all sorts of questions start to come up. Like if you're playing chess, and I give you a chess puzzle, and I don't tell you the answer to the puzzle. I don't even tell you that there is an answer to the puzzle. You may sit there and work out for a while, but you may say, okay, screw it. There's no answer to it. If I tell you there is an answer to it, you may sit there for hours trying to find an answer because I've already told you that the answer exists. Okay, what happens if it comes out that there's something here? Now, I don't need 1,000. I just need one. And if the Nimitz one, where you have a U.S. ship, a Navy ship in the ocean, that ship gets a radar signal, airplanes go out in order to see it. You get, what is his name? The guy used to fly on 9/11. You get Dietrich and Fraser flying in two different airplanes, observing an object that came out of the water, and that when he tries to get closer, it takes off at this ridiculous speed. Now, you get human contact, meaning people watching it for a period of time. You get ships watching it. You get people on those ships seeing it come out of the water. You get radar contacts for it. You see something meaning you have found something that is radically different than what we would consider to be normal flight characteristics. And you're seeing this stuff all over. The moment that becomes legitimate, then the catch becomes, okay, how did they get here? Where did they come from? Where are they stationed? How are those ships being made? But all of this stuff comes into play. How are they moving in the way that they're moving? What level of physics are they using in order to do what they're doing? How are they breaking physics as we understand it? Our reality fundamentally changes overnight. Like it's like what we thought was possible, what we thought was impossible, immediately becomes possible in our daily reality. And that reality is so big to kind of accommodate that I think the American public thinks to themselves, okay, maybe something is going on, but they don't internalize it in the way that we internalize the value of a dollar. It's kind of out on the outskirts. If that thing ever becomes common knowledge, oh God, our reality changes. No, it's a big conversation. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, it's perfectly fine. In fact, I invite you, perhaps, maybe if not next week, the week after, let me know what your schedule's like. I know you do your own show as well, so let's make that be a to be continued. But everyone was demanding that Jamarl Thomas show up on my show. I deliver, as always. That's one of my 2025 promises. So everybody, we're going to still continue on with the rest of our main show. Have a great weekend, Jamal. All the
No,
best.
thanks, man. I
And
appreciate this.
thank you for making time out of your day. Folks, we're going to continue on with the rest of our main show. So stay tuned because we got ourselves a Super Friday show, and our next guest should be showing up in just a little bit. So there you go. So let's go ahead and move on. All the best to you, my friend.
Have a good one, man. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Radio station just censored the word devil. Clearly, we are on a different level. I guess you wouldn't notice all the rolling boulders crashing past your shoulders when you're taught to shift your focus lower, scream at all the pebbles. Cheering on the bombers because you can't abide the rebels. But I bet you'll wring your bloody hands when all the dust has settled, when the last little limb is pulled from Gaza's twisted metal. Then you can say how you were led astray, and never once in all your days would you have knowingly supported all the genocide for which you clapped and prayed. But they baited you with unconfirmed blurbs about babies until you were filled with rage. Yet someone told you babies had been starving, bombed, and caged for nearly 80 years in Gaza, and you looked the other way. So regret, but make it fashion. Go and pluck that final petal off a hyacinth on Instagram for every kid they kettled. Every son that Israel imprisoned when they're little, that they tortured for a decade, then surprised with their acquittal. And when they got released and saw their parents and whatever siblings hadn't met the missiles, they stared right through their middle. Their eyes don't seem to focus, and their words are all but dribble, like they're pondering the darkest riddle. That is, how many false flags does it take to make humanity inhuman and uncivil, distorted by the revel? The crooked slant where Israel contorts into America, Biden bathing Bibi in a bloodbath in the bevel. I opened up my feed and I saw children disassembled. Turned some music on and heard the station censor devil. Imagine thinking Doja Cat's a threat to moral fabric in the single largest terror cell that ever felled a temple, that ever sparked a cleansing, that ever burned a market, that ever raped with bayonets or carpet-bombed apartments, that ever turned your water off and left you in the darkness, left you doing surgery on children while they're conscious. You sing the devil's praises every time you sing our anthem. You sing a hymn to him that watched us birth a million phantoms. You'll proudly wave his flag, and yet you will not name the devil? Well, clearly, we are on a different level. I can give you names, shit, I'll give you several. They say the devil wears a different face for every general, like a composite of the char he brought to fields of emerald, and the wail of every childhood we made ephemeral. So who else has left the stain of blood on everything they touch? Who else can starve civilians and they don't so much as blush? Who else has paid for Gaza being flattened into dust? If there's ever been a devil on this earth, then it is us. That's U.S. What an ugly couple letters. Feeding shit and ignorance to those it chose to tether. From the river to the sea, both are slowly growing redder. For the devil that you know just knows you better. It knows every gut reaction it could ever make you feel. It knows fear is that which wakes you up and gets you on your wheel. It knows just the kind of story that will justify its war. And the scripts are wrapped for World War IV. So just imagine my surprise to give the radio a listen and to hear such pious morals out of Zionists and Christians that they'd take the devil's name and try to clip it from existence while they carry out his bloody business. You would wave a fascist flag, and yet you honor not your Iblis? Name you not Apollyon? Hush you now your witness? Bleed the name of Belial till tongue is rolling listless in the man-made mouth of Mammon, as Lamia's whispers listen. When carts are wheeling bodies through the cities that we crushed, and the very air is rotten with decay of all that was, who else would censor devil yet behave as Legion does? If there's ever been a devil on this earth, then it is us. U.S., but not a unity of souls. More a mass of corporations turning houses into holes, turning people into puppets, turning puppets into mold, turning mold into nutrition bars worth their weight in gold because they're bombing every bakery and burning every field with phosphorus that never once has wanted for a meal. The devil wears a mask and it delights in the reveal, in that moment where the face is let to peel. We do not love the underdog. We do not cheer the rebels. We lust for all their blood until the dust has finally settled. Then pity just ourselves that we were so misled to revel. Proudly wave his flag, and yet we will not name the devil.